Hello, warriors. Today I want to talk to you about my experience with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a disorder that is different from the normal post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's characterized by trauma, but that lasted for a long period of time. So normal CPTSD normally occurs, for example, in war. You were hit by a bomb and I don't know, you lost your arm, for example, and then now you're having flashbacks and you have PTSD. Complex PTSD is a series of events that happen for a long period of time, normally childhood abuse. So I was abused as a child from both my parents, especially my mother, for years and years and years and years. And then when I finally went to therapy, I was diagnosed with HPD, histrionic personality disorder. And I totally didn't agree with that diagnosis because I'm not hyper dramatic in the sense that I don't exaggerate things. I don't exaggerate things for others to notice me. I'm not a predator. I don't manipulate people. So it was confusing because I agree with certain parts of that diagnosis. So I do agree with the part that I dramatize things in my head. That is true. But then I read that you actually can be misdiagnosed with a personality disorder while in fact you just have CPTSD. So I read a book from Pete Walker, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, where he explains exactly that. He explains that you can have symptoms that can be linked to a personality disorder, but not necessarily have it, but for sure having CPTSD. And when I read that book, it was really eye-opening for me because I related to everything he said on the book. So the biggest manifestation for me is indeed the catastrophizing and the dramatizing. Having complex PTSD implies that you're going to react excessively to an event that doesn't require that kind of reaction because your brain is still stuck in childhood and doesn't know how to react and perceives that event as a danger, an immediate danger. That's why some of us, for example, are really bad in social situations. Some of us are really bad in relations, love relations, and some of us are really bad in work relations, for example, because there's a part of our brain that is not developed emotionally yet. Normally, this manifests as the 4 Fs. So I think we all know about the 2 Fs, fight or flight. In a person with this condition, it manifests too much. So we will have these reactions even though there's no danger at all. For example, someone says something that hurts us and we just go home and cry for days. That happened to me in the past. Now it's better with therapy, but it could happen to me. And so we react on these 4 ways to perceived danger. The fight, I think, is obvious. The fight is for example, someone reacting really aggressively to whatever the other person has said. The flight is normally for an animal will be to run away, but for a human, in my case, I have a flight reaction, which is when I find myself in a stressful situation or when in a hurtful situation, I, to use the expression of Pete Walker, the author of the book, I run around like a chicken without a head. And that's really counterproductive because if you're running around all the time, you get nothing done. I'm better at it now. I use relaxation techniques and I have to literally make myself calm down, otherwise I will go insane. So that's the flight. And the freeze is compared to, for example, a little lizard that sees a predator, so he freezes, he just stops, and in hopes that the predator doesn't see him. And in real life, for people who have CPTSD, it can be, for example, depression, or when you don't get out of bed for days, or it can be those people who who smoke a lot of joints and just sit in front of television doing nothing. That's a form of freezing, because it's denying yourself to the outer world. And the fawning is, for example, when there's a puppy and the puppy sees a bigger dog and he goes like this, like he sits around. I can't do it with 2 paws because my hand is holding the phone, but he goes like this, and it's like a sign that he is giving control to the other animal, recognizing his superiority, so to speak. In real life, I'm also a fawner. I used to be much worse. This is like so it is possible to get better from your CPTSD, but I used to people please so much. I couldn't be assertive. I used to do whatever other people would say, and the worst is sometimes when I would assert myself, I would start crying. And this is a traumatic reaction, and Pete Walker calls this an emotional flashback. So an emotional flashback is not a flashback in which you see, like, for example, a bomb exploded next to you, so you remember and you see the bomb vividly. It's an emotional thing, so it's a regression to childhood where you feel whatever it is that your parents made you feel. For example, in my case, my parents used to shame me if I asserted myself. So now in adult life, whenever I asserted myself, fought for my rights, I would start crying because I thought it was a bad thing to do. In my head, I was still a little child. In my head, I would go back to childhood. So that's how it felt for me. So yes, there's a lot of ways in which CPTSD can manifest. I would love to hear from you if you have it. How does it manifest for you? In my case, these are the ones, and mostly catastrophizing. Something really minor happens and I think it's the end of the world and I'm going to be living in the streets. And actually Pete Walker talks about this. He says that a lot of his clients have this fantasy where they will end up living in the streets, which was a relief for me because I thought I was the only one who thought that. But apparently if you have the tendency to catastrophize like a lot of us do, then you will get to the end, and the end is I'm gonna live in a homeless shelter and no one's gonna ever love me anymore. I still have some emotional flashbacks. I have periods where I don't function very well, especially when too much is placed upon me, and I have a problem dealing with uncertainty, and exactly because in my head, the drama is already beginning, and I have a problem calming down because of the flighting, and also, yes, asserting myself is still kind of an issue also, actually. It's kind of a big deal whenever I have to ask something to my boss, for example, or my landlord or something like that. It's still not obvious, but I'm getting in there, so I'm hoping to hear from you guys. What do you have to say? How does it manifest to you? And I wish you happy healings in the meantime.